Book 3, Part 1 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 3, Part 1, Proem. O thou, who first uplifted in such dark, so clear a torch aloft, who first shed light upon the profitable ends of man, O thee I follow, glory of the Greeks, and set my footsteps squarely planted now, even in the impress and the marks of thine, less like one eager to dispute the palm, more as one craving out of very love that I may copy thee. For how should swallow contend with swans? Or what compare could be in a race between young kids with tumbling legs and the strong might of the horse? Our father thou, and finder out of truth, and thou to us suppliest a father's precepts. And from out those scriven leaves of thine, renowned soul, like bees that sip of all in flowery wolds, we feed upon thy golden sayings all, golden and ever worthiest endless life. For soon as ever thy planning thought that sprang from godlike mind begins its loud proclaim of nature's courses, terrors of the brain asunder flee, the ramparts of the world dispart away, and through the void entire I see the movements of the universe. Rises to vision the majesty of gods, and their abodes of everlasting calm, which neither wind may shake, nor rain clouds splash, nor snow congealed by sharp frosts may harm with its white downfall. Ever unclouded sky o'er roofs, and laughs with far diffused light. And nature gives to them their all, nor aught may ever pluck their peace of mind away. But nowhere to my vision rise no more the vaults of Acheron, though the broad earth bars me no more from gazing down o'er all which under our feet is going on below along the void. O here in these affairs some new divine delight and trembling awe takes hold through me, that thus by power of thine nature, so plain and manifest at last, hath been on every side laid bare to man. And since I've taught already of what sort the seeds of all things are, and how, distinct in divers forms, they flit of own accord, stirred with a motion everlasting on, and in what mode things be from them create. Now, after such matters, should my verse, meseems, make clear the nature of the mind and soul, and drive that dread of Acheron without headlong, which so confounds our human life unto its deeps, pouring o'er all that is the black of death, nor leaves not anything to prosper, a liquid and unsullied joy. For as to what men sometimes will affirm, that more than Tartarus, the realm of death, they fear diseases and a life of shame, and know the substance of the soul is blood, or rather wind, if haply thus their whim, and so need naught of this our science, then thou well mayst note from what's to follow now that more for glory do they braggart forth than for belief. For mark these very same, exiles from country, fugitives afar from sight of men, with charges foul attaint, abased with every wretchedness, they yet live, and where'er the wretches come, they yet make the ancestral sacrifices there, butcher the black sheep, and to gods below offer the honours, and in bitter case turn much more keenly to religion. Wherefore, its surer testing of a man in doubtful perils, mark him as he is amid adversities. For then alone are the true voices conjured from his breast, the mask off stripped, reality behind. And greed again, and the blind lust of honours, which force poor wretches past the bounds of law, and oft allies and ministers of crime, to push through nights and days with hugest toil, to rise untrammelled to the peaks of power. These wounds of life, in no mean part, are kept festering and open by this fright of death. For ever we see fierce want and foul disgrace dislodged afar from secure life and sweet, like huddling shapes before the doors of death. And whilst from these men wish to scape afar, driven by false terror, and afar remove, with civic blood, a fortune they amass, they double their riches, greedy heapers up of corpse on corpse, they have a cruel laugh for the sad burial of a brother born, and hatred and fear of tables of their kin. Likewise, through this same terror, envy oft makes them to peak, because before their eyes that man is lordly, that man gazed upon who walks begirt with honour glorious, whilst they in filth and darkness roll around. Some perish away for statues and a name, and oft to that degree, from fright of death, will hate of living and beholding light take hold on humankind, that they inflict their own destruction with a gloomy heart, forgetful that this fear is fount of cares, this fear the plague upon their sense of shame, and this that breaks the ties of camaraderie and oversets all reverence and faith mid direst slaughter. For long ere to-day, often were traitors to country and dear parents through quest to shun the realms of Acheron. For just as children tremble and fear all in the viewless dark, so even we, at times, dread in the light so many things that be no whit more fearsome than what children feign, shuddering, will be upon them in the dark. This terror, then, this darkness of the mind, not sunrise with its flaring spokes of light, nor glittering arrows of morning sun disperse, but only nature's aspect and her law. End of Book 3, Part 1. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 3, Part 2 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 3, Part 2. Nature and Composition of the Mind. First, then, I say, the mind, which oft we call the intellect, wherein is seated life's counsel and regimen, is part no less of man than hand and foot and eyes are parts of one whole breathing creature. But some hold that sense of mind is in no fixed parts seated, but is of body some one vital state, named harmony by Greeks, because thereby we live with sense, though intellect be not in any part, as oft the body is said to have good health, when health, however, 's not one part of him who has it. So they place the sense of mind in no fixed part of man. Mightily, diversly, meseems, they err. Often the body palpable and seen sickens, while yet in some invisible part we feel a pleasure. Oft the other way, a miserable in mind feels pleasure still throughout his body, quite the same as when a foot may pain, without a pain in head. Besides, when these our limbs are given o'er to gentle sleep, and lies the burdened frame at random, void of sense, a something else is yet within us, which upon that time bestirs itself in many a wise, receiving all motions of joy and phantom cares of heart. Now, for to see that in man's members dwells also the soul, and body ne'er is wont to feel sensation by a harmony, take this in chief. The fact that life remains oft in our limbs, when much of body's gone, yet that same life, when particles of heat, though few, have scattered been, and through the mouth air has been given forth abroad, forthwith forever deserts the veins, and leaves the bones. Thus mayest thou know that not all particles perform like parts, nor in like manner all are props of weal and safety. Rather those, the seeds of wind and exhalations warm, take care that in our members life remains. Therefore a vital heat and wind there is within the very body, which at death deserts our frames. And so, since nature of mind and even of soul is found to be, as 'twere, a part of man, give over harmony, name to musicians brought from Helicon, unless themselves they filched it otherwise, to serve for what was lacking name till then. Whate'er it be, they're welcome to it. Thou hearken my other maxims. Mind and soul, I say, are held conjoined one with other, and form one single nature of themselves. But chief and regnant through the frame entire is still that counsel which we call the mind, and that cleaves seated in the midmost breast. Here leap dismay and terror, round these haunts be blandishments of joys, and therefore here the intellect, the mind. The rest of soul, throughout the body scattered, but obeys, moved by the nod and motion of the mind. This for itself, soul through itself hath thought. This for itself hath mirth, even when the thing that moves it moves nor soul nor body at all. And as when head or eye in us is smit by assailing pain, we are not tortured then through all the body, so the mind alone is sometimes smitten, or livens with a joy, whilst yet the soul's remainder through the limbs and through the frame is stirred by nothing new. But when the mind is moved by shock more fierce, we mark the whole soul suffering all at once along man's members. Sweats and pallors spread over the body, and the tongue is broken, and fails the voice away, and ring the ears, mists blind the eyeballs, and the joints collapse. Aye, men drop dead from terror of the mind. Hence, whoso will can readily remark that soul conjoined is with mind, and when 'tis strook by influence of the mind, forthwith in turn it hits and drives the body too. And this same argument establisheth that nature of mind and soul corporeal is. For when 'tis seen to drive the members on, to snatch from sleep the body, and to change the countenance, and the whole state of man to rule and turn, what yet could never be sans contact, and sans body contact fails, must we not grant that mind and soul consist of a corporeal nature? And besides, thou mark'st that likewise with this body of ours suffers the mind, and with our body feels. If the dire speed of spear that cleaves the bones and bears the inner thews hits not the life, yet follows a fainting and a foul collapse, and on the ground dazed tumult in the mind, and whiles a wavering will to rise afoot. So nature of mind must be corporeal, since from stroke and spear corporeal 'tis in throes. Now, of what body, what components formed is this same mind, I will go on to tell. First, I aver, 'tis superfine, composed of tiniest particles, that such the fact thou canst perceive if thou attend from this. Nothing is seen to happen with such speed as what the mind proposes and begins. Therefore the same bestirs itself more swiftly than aught whose nature's palpable to eyes. But what's so agile must of seeds consist most round, most tiny, that they may be moved when hit by impulse slight. So water moves in waves along, at impulse just the least, being create of little shapes that roll. But contrariwise, the quality of honey more stable is, its liquids more inert, more tardy its flow, for all its stock of matter cleaves more together, since indeed 'tis made of atoms not so smooth, so fine and round. For the light breeze that hovers yet can blow high heaps of poppy seed away for thee downward from off the top, but, contrariwise, a pile of stones or spiny ears of wheat it can't at all. Thus, in so far as bodies are small and smooth, is their mobility, but, contrariwise, the heavier and more rough, the more immovable they prove. Now then, since nature of mind is movable so much, consist it must of seeds exceeding small and smooth and round. Which fact, once known to thee, good friend, will serve thee opportune in else. This also shows the nature of the same, how nice its texture, in how small a space 'twould go, if once compacted as a pellet. When death's unvexed repose gets hold on man, and mind and soul retire, thou markest there from the whole body nothing ta'en in form, nothing in weight. Death grants ye everything but vital sense and exhalation hot. Thus soul entire must be of smallmost seeds, twined through the veins, the vitals, and the thews. Seeing that when 'tis from the whole body gone, the outward figuration of the limbs is unimpaired, and weight fails not a whit. Just so, when vanished the bouquet of wine, or when an unguent's perfume delicate into the winds away departs, or when from any body savour's gone, yet still the thing itself seems minished naught to eyes, thereby nor aught abstracted from its weight. No marvel, because seeds many and minute produce the savours and the redolence in the whole body of the things. And so again, nature of mind and soul, 'tis thine to know, created is of seeds the tiniest ever, since at flying forth it beareth nothing of the weight away. Yet fancy not its nature simple so, for an impalpable aura mixed with heat deserts the dying, and heat draws off the air, and heat there's none unless commixed with air. For since the nature of all heat is rare, athrough it many seeds of air must move. Thus nature of mind is triple. Yet those all suffice not for creating sense, since mind accepteth not that aught of these can cause sense-bearing motions, and much less the thoughts a man revolves in mind. So unto these must added be a somewhat, and a fourth. That somewhat's altogether void of name, than which existeth naught more mobile, naught more and impalpable, of elements more small and smooth and round. That first transmits sense-bearing motions through the frame, for that is roused the first, composed of little shapes. Thence heat and viewless force of wind take up the motions, and thence air, and thence all things are put in motion. The blood is strook, and then the vitals all begin to feel, and last to bones and marrow the sensation comes, pleasure or torment. Nor will pain for naught enter so far, nor a sharp ill seep through, but all things be perturbed to that degree that room for life will fail, and parts of soul will scatter through the body's every pore. Yet, as a rule, almost upon the skin these motion all are stopped, and this is why we have the power to retain our life. Now, in my eagerness to tell thee how they are commixed, through what unions fit they function so, my country's pauper speech constrains me sadly. As I can, however, I'll touch some points and pass. In such a wise course these primordials mongst one another, with intermotions that no one can be from other sundered, nor its agency perform, if once divided by a space. Like many powers, in one body they work. As in the flesh of any creature still is odour and savour and a certain warmth, and yet from all of these one bulk of body is made complete, so viewless force of wind and warmth and air commingled do create one nature, by that mobile energy assisted which, from out itself to them, imparts initial motion, whereby first sense-bearing motion along the vitals springs. For lurks this essence far and deep and under, nor in our body is aught more shut from view, and 'tis the very soul of all the soul. And as within our members and whole frame the energy of mind and power of soul is mixed and latent, since create it is of bodies small and few, so lurks this fourth, this essence void of name, composed of small, and seems the very soul of all the soul, and holds dominion o'er the body all. And by like reason wind and air and heat must function so, commingled through the frame, and now the one subside, and now another in interchange of dominance, that thus from all of them one nature be produced, lest heat and wind apart, and air apart, make sense to perish by disseverment. There is indeed in mind that heat it gets when seething in rage, and flashes from the eyes more swiftly fire. There is, again, that wind, much and so cold, companion of all dread, which rouses the shudder in the shaken frame. There is no less that state of air composed, making the tranquil breast, the serene face. But more of hot have they, whose restive hearts, whose minds of passion quickly seethe in rage, of which kind chief are fierce abounding lions, who often with roaring burst the breast o'erwrought, unable to hold the surging wrath within. But the cold mind of stags has more of wind, and speedier through their inwards rouses up the icy currents which make their members quake. But more the oxen live by tranquil air, nor e'er doth smoky torch of wrath applied, or spreading with shadows of a darkling murk, rouse them too far, nor will they stiffen stark, pierced through by icy javelins of fear, but have their place halfway between the two, stags and fierce lions. Thus the race of men, Though training make them equally refined, it leaves those pristine vestiges behind of each mind's nature. Nor may we suppose evil can e'er be rooted up so far that one man's not more given to fits of wrath, another's not more quickly touched by fear, a third not more long-suffering than he should. And needs must differ in many things besides the varied natures and resulting habits of humankind, of which not now can I expound the hidden causes, nor find names enough for all the divers shapes of those primordials whence this variation springs. But this, meseems, I'm able to declare. Those vestiges of natures left behind, which reason cannot quite expel from us, are still so slight that naught prevents a man from living a life even worthy of the gods. So then, this soul is kept by all the body, itself the body's guard and source of weal. For they with common roots cleave each to each, nor can be torn asunder without death. Not easy 'tis from lumps of frankincense to tear their fragrance forth, without its nature perishing likewise. So not easy 'tis from all the body nature of mind and soul to draw away, without the whole dissolved. With seeds so intertwined, even from birth, they're dowered conjointly with a partner life. No energy of body or mind, apart each of itself without the other's power, can have sensation. But our sense, enkindled along the vitals, to flame is blown by both with mutual motions. Besides, the body alone is nor begot nor grows, nor after death seen to endure. For not as water at times gives off the alien heat, nor is thereby itself destroyed, but unimpaired remains, not thus, I say, can the deserted frame bear the dissevering of its joined soul, but, rent and ruined, moulders all away. Thus, the joint contact of the body and soul learns from their earliest age the vital motions, even when still buried in the mother's womb, so no dissevering can hap to them without their bane and ill. And thence mayest see that as conjoined is their source of weal, conjoined also must their nature be. If one, moreover, denies that body feel, and holds that soul, through all the body mixed, takes on this motion which we title sense, he battles in vain indubitable facts. For who'll explain what body's feeling is, except by what the public fact itself has given and taught us? But when soul is parted, body's without all sense. True. Loses what was even in its lifetime not its own, and much beside it loses when soul's driven forth from that lifetime. Or, to say that eyes themselves can see no thing, but through the same the mind looks forth, as out of opened doors, is a hard saying, since the feel in eyes says the reverse, for this itself draws on and forces into the pupils of our eyes our consciousness. And note the case when often we lack the power to see refulgent things, because our eyes are hampered by their light. With a mere doorway this would happen not. For since it is our very selves that see, no open portals undertake the toil. Besides, if eyes of ours but act as doors, methinks that were our sight removed, the mind ought then still better to behold a thing, when even the door-posts have been cleared away. Herein, in these affairs, no wise take up what honored sage Democritus lays down. That proposition, that primordials of body and mind, each superposed on each, vary alternately and interweave the fabric of our members. For not only are the soul elements smaller far than those which this our body and inward parts compose, but also are they in their number less, and scattered sparsely through our frame. And thus this canst thou guarantee: soul's primal germs maintain between them intervals as large at least as are the smallest bodies, which, when thrown against us, in our body rouse sense-bearing motions. Hence it comes that we sometimes don't feel alighting on our frames the clinging dust, or chalk that settles soft, nor mists of night, nor spiders' gossamer we feel against us, when, upon our road, its net entangles us, nor on our head the dropping of its withered garmentings, nor bird feathers, nor vegetable down flying about, so light they barely fall, nor feel the steps of every crawling thing, nor each of all those footprints on our skin of midges and the like. To that degree must many primal germs be stirred in us, ere once the seeds of soul that through our frame are intermingled gin to feel that those primordials of the body have been strook, and ere, in pounding with such gaps between, they clash, combine, and leap apart in turn. But mind is more the keeper of the gates, hath more dominion over life than soul. For without intellect and mind, there's not one part of soul can rest within our frame, least part of time. Companioning, it goes with mind into the winds away, and leaves the icy members in the cold of death. But he whose mind and intellect abide, himself abides in life. However much the trunk be mangled, with the limbs lopped off, the soul withdrawn and taken from the limbs, still lives the trunk and draws the vital air. Even when deprived of all but all the soul, yet will it linger on and cleave to life. Just as the power of vision still is strong, if but the pupil shall abide unharmed, even when the eye around it's sorely rent, provided only thou destroyest not wholly the ball, but, cutting round the pupil, leavest that pupil by itself behind, for more would ruin sight. But if that centre, that tiny part of eye, be eaten through, forthwith the vision fails and darkness comes, though in all else the unblemished ball be clear. 'Tis by like compact that the soul and mind are each to other bound forevermore. End of Book 3, Part 2. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 3, Part 3 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus. Translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 3, Part 3. The Soul is Mortal. Now come, that thou mayest able be to know that minds and the light souls of all that live have mortal birth and death. I will go on, verses to build, meet for thy rule of life, sought after long, discovered with sweet toil. But under one name I'd have thee yoke them both. And when, for instance, I shall speak of soul, teaching the same to be but mortal, think thereby I'm speaking also of the mind, since both are one, a substance interjoined. First, then, since I have taught how soul exists, a subtle fabric of particles minute, made up from atoms smaller much than those of water's liquid damp, or fog, or smoke, so in mobility it far excels, more prone to move, though strook by lighter cause, even moved by images of smoke or fog. As where we view, when in our sleeps we're lulled, the altars exhaling steam and smoke aloft. For beyond doubt, these apparitions come to us from outward. Now then, since thou seest their liquids depart, their waters flow away when jars are shivered, and since fog and smoke depart into the winds away, believe the soul no less is shed abroad, and dies more quickly far, more quickly is dissolved back to its primal bodies, when withdrawn from out man's members it has gone away. For sure, if body, container of the same like as a jar, when shivered from some cause and rarefied by loss of blood from veins, cannot for longer hold the soul, how then, think'st thou, it can be held by any air, a stuff much rarer than our bodies be? Besides, we feel that mind to being comes along with body grows and ages. For just as children totter round about with frames infirm and tender, so there follows a weakling wisdom in their minds. And then, where years have ripened into robust powers, counsel is also greater, more increased the power of mind. Thereafter, where already the body's shattered by master powers of eld, and fallen the frame with its enfeebled powers, thought hobbles, tongue wanders, and the mind gives way. All fails, all's lacking at the self-same time. Therefore it suits that even the soul's dissolved, like smoke, into the lofty winds of air, since we behold the same to being come along with body and grow, and, as I've taught, crumble and crack, therewith outworn by eld. Then, too, we see that just as body takes monstrous diseases and the dreadful pain, so mind its bitter cares, the grief, the fear. Wherefore it tallies that the mind no less partaker is of death. For pain and disease are both artificers of death, as well we've learned by the passing of many a man ere now. Nay, too, in diseases of body, often the mind wanders afield, for 'tis beside itself, and crazed it speaks, or many a time it sinks, with eyelids closing and a drooping nod in heavy drowse, on to eternal sleep, from whence nor hears it any voices more, nor able is to know the faces here of those about him standing with wet cheeks, who vainly call him back to light and life. Wherefore mind, too, confess we must, dissolves, seeing indeed contagions of disease enter into the same. Again, oh, why, when the strong wine has entered into man, and its diffused fire gone round the veins, why follows then a heaviness of limbs, a tangle of the legs as round he reels, a stuttering tongue, an intellect besoaked, eyes all aswim, and hiccups, shouts, and brawls, and whatso else is of that ilk? Why this, if not that violent and impetuous wine is wont to confound the soul within the body? But whatso can confounded be and balked gives proof that if a hardier cause got in, 'twould hap that it would perish then, bereaved of any life thereafter. And moreover, often will someone in a sudden fit, as if by stroke of lightning, tumble down before our eyes, and sputter foam, and grunt, blither, and twist about with sinews taut, gasp up in starts, and weary out his limbs with tossing round. No marvel, since distract through frame by violence of disease. Confounds, he foams, as if to vomit soul, as on the salt sea boil the billows round under the master might of winds. And now groans forced out, because his limbs are griped, but in the main because the seeds of voice are driven forth and carried in a mass outwards by mouth, where they are wont to go, and have a builded highway. He becomes mere fool, since energy of mind and soul confounded is, and, as I've shown, to riven, asunder thrown, and torn to pieces all by the same venom. But again, where cause of that disease is faced about, and back retreats sharp poison of corrupted frame into its shadowy lairs, the man at first arises reeling, and gradually comes back to all his senses and recovers soul. Thus, since within the body itself of man the mind and soul are by such great diseases shaken, so miserably in labour distraught, why, then, believe that in the open air, without a body, they can pass their life immortal, battling with the master winds? And since we mark the mind itself is cured, like the sick body, and restored can be by medicine, this is forewarning too that mortal lives the mind. For proper it is that whosoe'er begins and undertakes to alter the mind, or meditates to change any another nature soever, should add new parts, or readjust the order given, or from the sum remove at least a bit. But what's immortal willeth for itself its parts be nor increased, nor rearranged, nor any bit soever flow away. For change of anything from out its bounds means instant death of that which was before. Ergo, the mind, whether in sickness fallen, or by the medicine restored, gives signs, as I have taught, of its mortality. So surely will a fact of truth make head 'gainst error's theories all, and so shut off all refuge from the adversary, and rout error by two-edged confutation. And since the mind is of a man one part, which in one fixed place remains, like ears and eyes, and every sense which pilots life, and just as hand or eye or nose apart, severed from us, can neither feel nor be, but in the least of time is left to rot, thus mind alone can never be, without the body and the man himself, which seems as 'twere the vessel of the same, or aught whate'er thou'lt fain is yet more closely joined, since body cleaves to mind by surest bonds. Again, the body's and the mind's live powers only in union prosper and enjoy. For neither can nature of mind alone of self sans body give the vital motions forth, nor then can body, wanting soul, endure and use the senses. Verily, as the eye alone, uprended from its roots, apart from all the body, can peer about at naught, so soul and mind, it seems, are nothing able when by themselves. No marvel, because commixed through veins and inwards, and through bones and thews, their elements primordial are confined by all the body, and own no power free to bound around through interspaces big. Thus, shut within these confines, they take on motions of sense, which, after death, thrown out beyond the body to the winds of air, take on they cannot, and on this account, because no more in such a way confined. For air will be a body, be alive, if in that air the soul can keep itself, and in that air enclose those motions all, which in the thews and in the body itself a while ago 'twas making. So for this again, I say, confess we must, that when the body's wrappings are unwound, and when the vital breath is forced without, the soul, the senses of the mind, dissolve. Since for the twain the cause and ground of life is in the fact of their conjoined estate. Once more, since bodies unable to sustain division from the soul, without decay and obscene stench, how canst thou doubt but that the soul, uprisen from the body's deeps, has filtered away, wide drifted like a smoke? Or that the changed body crumbling fell with ruin so entire, because indeed its deep foundations have been moved from place, the soul out-filtering even through the frame, and through the body's every winding way and orifice. And so by many means thou art free to learn that nature of the soul hath passed in fragments out along the frame, and that 'twas shivered in the very body ere ever it slipped abroad and swam away into the winds of air. For never a man dying appears to feel the soul go forth as one sure whole from all his body at once, nor first come up the throat and into mouth, but feels it failing in a certain spot, even as he knows the senses too dissolve, each in its own location in the frame. But were this mind of ours immortal mind, dying, 'twould scarce bewail a dissolution, but rather the going, the leaving of its coat, like to a snake. Wherefore, when once the body hath passed away, admit we must that soul, shivered in all that body, perished too. Nay, even when moving in the bounds of life, often the soul, now tottering from some cause, craves to go out, and from the frame entire loosened to be. The countenance becomes flaccid, as if the supreme hour were there, and flabbily collapse the members all against the bloodless trunk. The kind of case we see when we remark in common phrase, "That man's quite gone," or "fainted, dead away." And where there's now a bustle of alarm, and all are eager to get some hold upon the man's last link of life. For then the mind and all the power of soul are shook so sore, and these so totter along with all the frame, that any cause a little stronger might dissolve them altogether. Why then doubt that soul, when once without the body thrust, there in the open, an enfeebled thing, its wrappings stripped away, cannot endure, not only through no everlasting age, but even indeed through not the least of time? Then, too, why never is the intellect, the counselling mind, begotten in the head, the feet, the hands, instead of cleaving still to one sole seat, to one fixed haunt, the breast? If not, that fixed places be assigned for each thing's birth, where each, when 'tis create, is able to endure, and that our frames have such complex adjustments that no shift in order of our members may appear. To that degree effect succeeds to cause, Nor is the flame once wont to be create in flowing streams, nor cold begot in fire. Besides, if nature of soul immortal be, and able to feel when from our frame disjoined, the same, I fancy, must be thought to be endowed with senses 5. Nor is there way but this, whereby to image to ourselves how under souls may roam in Acheron. Thus painters and the elder race of bards have pictured souls with senses so endowed. But neither eyes, nor nose, nor hand alone, apart from body, can exist for soul, nor tongue, nor ears apart. And hence, indeed, alone by self they can nor feel nor be. And since we mark the vital sense to be in the whole body, all one living thing, if of a sudden a force with rapid stroke should slice it down the middle and cleave in twain, beyond a doubt likewise the soul itself, divided, dissevered, asunder will be flung along with body. But what severed is, and into sundry parts divides, indeed admits it owns no everlasting nature. We hear how chariots of war, a-reek with hurly slaughter, lop with flashing scythes the limbs away so suddenly that there, fallen from the trunk, they quiver on the earth, the while the mind and powers of the man can feel no pain for swiftness of his hurt, and sheer abandon in the zest of battle. With the remainder of his frame he seeks anew the battle and the slaughter, nor marks how the swift wheels and scythes of ravin have dragged off with the horses his left arm and shield, nor other how his right has dropped away, mounting again and on. A third attempts with leg dismembered to arise and stand, whilst on the ground hard by the dying foot twitches its spreading toes. And even the head, when from the warm and living trunk lopped off, keeps on the ground the vital countenance and open eyes, until 'thas rendered up all remnants of the soul. Nay, once again, if, when a serpent's darting forth its tongue and lashing its tail, thou gettest chance to hew with axe its length of trunk to many parts, thou'lt see each severed fragment writhing round with its fresh wound and spattering up the sod, and there the forepart seeking with the jaws after the hinder, with bite to stop the pain. So, shall we say that these be souls entire in all those fractions? But from that 'twould follow one creatured have in body many souls. Therefore the soul, which was indeed but one, has been divided with the body too. Each is but mortal, since alike is each hewn into many parts. Again, how often we view our fellow going by degrees, and losing limb by limb the vital sense. First, nails and fingers of the feet turn blue, next die the feet and legs, then o'er the rest slow crawl the certain footsteps of cold death. And since this nature of the soul is torn, nor mounts away as at one time entire, we needs must hold it mortal. But perchance, if thou supposest that the soul itself can inward draw along the frame, and bring its parts together to one place, and so from all the members draw the sense away, why then that place in which such stock of soul collected is should greater seem in sense. But since such place is nowhere for a fact, as said before, 'tis rent and scattered forth, and so goes under. Or again, if now I please to grant the false, and say that soul can thus be lumped within the frames of those who leave the sunshine, dying bit by bit, still must the soul as mortal be confessed. Nor aught it matters whether to wrack it go, dispersed in the winds, or, gathered in a mass from all its parts, sink down to brutish death, since more and more in every region sense fails the whole man, and less of life in every region lingers. And besides, if soul immortal is, and winds its way into the body at the birth of man, why can we not remember something, then, of lifetime spent before? Why keep we not some footprints of the things we did of old? But if so changed hath been the power of mind, that every recollection of things done is fallen away, at no o'erlong remove is that, I trow, from what we mean by death. Wherefore 'tis sure that what hath been before hath died, and what now is now create. Moreover, if after the body hath been built our mind's live powers are wont to be put in, just at the moment that we come to birth and cross the sills of life, 'twould scarcely fit for them to live as if they seemed to grow along with limbs and frame, even in the blood, but rather as in a cavern all alone. Yet all the body duly throngs with sense. But public fact declares against all this, for soul is so entwined through the veins, the flesh, the thews, the bones, that even the teeth share in sensation, as proven by dull ache, by twinge from icy water, or grating crunch upon a stone that got in mouth with bread. Wherefore again souls must be thought nor void of birth, nor free from law of death. Nor, if from outward in they wound their way, could they be thought as able so to cleave to these our frames, nor, since so interwove, appears it that they're able to go forth unhurt and whole and loose themselves unscathed from all the thews, articulations, bones. But if perchance thou thinkest that the soul, from outward winding in its way, is wont to seep and soak along these members ours, then all the more 'twill perish, being thus with body fused. For what will seep and soak will be dissolved, and will therefore die. For just as food, dispersed through all the pores of body, and passed through limbs and all the frame, perishes, supplying from itself the stuff for other nature, thus the soul and mind, though whole and new into a body going, are yet, by seeping in, dissolved away, whilst, as through pores, to all the frame there pass those particles from which created is this nature of mind, now ruler of our body, born from that soul which perished when divided along the frame. Wherefore it seems that soul hath both a natal and funeral hour. Besides, are seeds of soul there left behind in the breathless body, or not? If there they are, it cannot justly be immortal deemed, since, shorn of some parts lost, 'thas gone away. But if borne off with members uncorrupt, 'thas fled so absolutely all away, it leaves not one remainder of itself behind in body. Whence do cadavers, then, from out their putrid flesh exhale the worms? And whence does such a mass of living things, boneless and bloodless, o'er the bloated frame bubble and swarm? But if perchance thou thinkest that souls from outward into worms can wind, and each into a separate body come, and reckonest not why many thousand souls collect where only one has gone away, here is a point, in sooth, that seems to need inquiry and a putting to the test, whether the souls go on a hunt for seeds of worms wherewith to build their dwelling places, or enter bodies ready made, as 'twere. But why themselves they thus should do and toil, 'tis hard to say, since, being free of body, they flit around, harassed by no disease, nor cold, nor famine. For the body labors by more of kinship to these flaws of life, and mind, by contact with that body, suffers so many ills. But grant it be for them, however useful, to construct a body to which to enter in, 'tis plain they can't. Then souls for self no frames nor bodies make, nor is there how they once might enter in to bodies ready made, for they cannot be nicely interwoven with the same, and there'll be formed no interplay of sense common to each. Again, why is it there goes impetuous rage with lions' breed morose, and cunning with foxes, and to deer why given the ancestral fear and tendency to flee? And why, in short, do all the rest of traits engender from the very start of life in the members and mentality, if not because one certain power of mind that came from its own seed and breed waxes the same along with all the body? But were mind immortal, were it wont to change its bodies, how topsy-turvy would earth's creatures act! The Hyrcan hound would flee the onset oft of antlered stag, the scurrying hawk would quake along the winds of air at the coming dove, and men would dote, and savage beasts be wise. For false the reasoning of those that say immortal mind is changed by change of body. For what is changed dissolves, and therefore dies. For parts are redisposed and leave their order, wherefore they must be also capable of dissolution through the frame at last, that they, along with body, perish all. But should some say that always souls of men go into human bodies, I will ask, how can a wise become a dullard soul? And why is never a child's a prudent soul? And the mare's filly, why not trained so well as sturdy strength of steed? We may be sure they'll take their refuge in the thought that mind becomes a weakling in a weakling frame. Yet, be this so, 'tis needful to confess the soul but mortal, since, so altered now throughout the frame, it loses the life and sense it had before. Or how can mind wax strong co-equally with body and attain the craved flower of life, unless it be the body's colleague in its origins? Or what's the purport of its going forth from aged limbs? Fears it perhaps to stay, pent in a crumbled body? Or lest its house, outworn by venerable length of days, may topple down upon it? But indeed, for an immortal, perils are there none. Again, at parturitions of the wild, and at the rites of love, that souls should stand ready hard by seems ludicrous enough. Immortals waiting for their mortal limbs in numbers innumerable, contending madly which shall be first and chief to enter in, unless perchance among the souls there be such treaties stablished that the first to come flying along shall enter in the first, and that they make no rivalries of strength. Again, in ether can't exist a tree, nor clouds in ocean deeps, nor in the fields can fishes live, nor blood in timber be, nor sap in boulders, fixed and arranged, where everything may grow and have its place. Thus, nature of mind cannot arise alone without the body, nor exist afar from thews and blood. But, if 'twere possible, much rather might this very power of mind be in the head, the shoulders, or the heels, and born in any part soever, yet in the same man, in the same vessel abide. But since within this body, even of ours, stands fixed and appears arranged sure, where soul and mind can each exist and grow, deny we must the more that they can have duration and birth, wholly outside the frame. For verily the mortal to conjoin with the eternal, and to feign they feel together, and can function each with each, is but to dote. For what can be conceived of more unlike, discrepant, ill assorted, than something mortal in a union joined with an immortal and a secular, to bear the outrageous tempests? Then again, whatever abides eternal must indeed either repel all strokes, because 'tis made of solid body, and permit no entrance of aught with power to sunder from within the parts compact, as are those seeds of stuff whose nature we've exhibited before, or else be able to endure through time for this, because they are from blows exempt, as is the void, the which abides untouched, unsmit by any stroke, or else because there is no room around where two things can, as 'twere, depart in dissolution all, even as the sum of sums eternal is, without or place beyond where two things may asunder fly, or bodies which can smite, and thus dissolve them by the blows of might. But if perchance the soul's to be adjudged immortal, mainly on ground 'tis kept secure in vital forces, either because there come never at all things hostile to its weal, or else because what come somehow retire, repelled or ere we feel the harm they work. For lo, besides that, when the frame's diseased, soul sickens too, there cometh many a time that which torments it with the things to be, keeps it in dread, and wearies it with cares. And even when evil acts are of the past, still gnaw the old transgressions bitterly. Add, too, that frenzy peculiar to the mind, and that oblivion of the things that were. Add its submergence in the murky waves of drowse and torpor. End of Book 3, Part 3. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 3, Part 4 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 3, Part 4. Folly of the Fear of Death. Therefore, death to us is nothing, nor concerns us in the least, since nature of mind is mortal evermore. And just as in the ages gone before we felt no touch of ill, when all sides round to battle came the Carthaginian host, and the times, shaken by tumultuous war, under the airy coasts of arching heaven shuddered and trembled, and all humankind doubted to which the empery should fall by land and sea. Thus, when we are no more, when comes that sundering of our body and soul, through which we're fashioned to a single state, verily, naught to us then no more can come to pass, naught move our senses then. No, not if earth confounded were with sea, and sea with heaven But if indeed do feel the nature of mind and energy of soul after their severance from this body of ours, yet nothing 'tis to us, who in the bonds and wedlock of the soul and body live, through which we're fashioned to a single state. And even if time collected after death the matter of our frames, and set it all again in place as now, and if again to us the light of life were given, oh, yet that process too would not concern us aught, when once the self-succession of our sense has been asunder broken. And now and here little enough we're busied with the selves we were aforetime, nor concerning them suffer a sore distress. For shouldst thou gaze backwards across all yesterdays of time the immeasurable, thinking how manifold the motions of matter are, then couldst thou well credit this too. Often these very seeds from which we are today, of old, were set in the same order as they are today. Yet this we can't to consciousness recall through the remembering mind. For there hath been an interposed pause of life, and wide have all the motions wandered everywhere from these our senses. For if woe and ail perchance are toward, then the man to whom the bane can happen must himself be there at that same time. But death precludeth this, forbidding life to him on whom might crowd such irk and care. And granted 'tis to know nothing for us there is to dread in death, no wretchedness for him who is no more, the same estate as if ne'er born before, when death immortal hath ta'en the mortal life. Hence, where thou seest a man to grieve, because when dead he rots with body laid away, or perishes in flames, or jaws of beasts, know well he rings not true, and that beneath still works an unseen sting upon his heart, however he deny that he believes his shall be aught of feeling after death. For he, I fancy, grants not what he says, nor what that presupposes, and he fails to pluck himself with all his roots from life and cast that self away, quite unawares, feigning that some remainder's left behind. For when in life one pictures to oneself his body dead by beasts and vultures torn, he pities his state, dividing not himself therefrom, removing not the self enough from the body flung away, imagining himself that body, and projecting there his own sense as he stands beside it. Hence he grieves that he is mortal born, nor marks that in true death there is no second self alive and able to sorrow for self destroyed, or stand lamenting that the self lies there mangled or burning. For if it an evil is, dead, to be jerked about by jaw and fang of the wild brutes, I see not why 'twere not bitter to lie on fires and roast in flames, or suffocate in honey, and, reclined on the smooth oblong of an icy slab, grow stiff in cold, or sink with load of earth down crushing from above. Thee now no more the joyful house and best of wives shall welcome, nor little sons run up to snatch their kisses and touch with silent happiness thy heart. Thou shalt not speed in undertakings more, nor be the warder of thine own no more, poor wretch, they say. One hostile hour hath ta'en wretchedly from thee all life's many guerdons. But add not, yet no longer unto thee remains a remnant of desire for them. If this they only well perceived with mind, and followed up with maxims, they would free their state of man from anguish and from fear. Oh, even as here thou art, a slumber in death, so shalt thou slumber down the rest of time, released from every harrying pang. But we have bewept thee with insatiate woe, standing beside, whilst on the awful pyre thou wert made ashes, and no day shall take for us the eternal sorrow from the breast. But ask the mourner, what's the bitterness that man should waste in an eternal grief, if, after all, the thing's but sleep and rest? For when the soul and frame together are sunk in slumber, no one then demands his self or being. Well, this sleep may be forever, without desire of any selfhood more, for all it matters unto us asleep. Yet not at all do those primordial germs roam round our members at that time, afar from their own motions that produce our senses. Since, when he's startled from his sleep, a man collects his senses. Death is then to us much less, if there can be a less than that which is itself a nothing. For there comes hard upon death a scattering more great of the throng of matter, and no man wakes up on whom once falls the icy pause of life. This too, often from the soul men say, along their couches holding of the cups, with faces shaded by fresh wreaths awry. Brief is this fruit of joy to paltry man, soon departed, and thereafter, no, it may not be recalled. As if, forsooth, it were their prime of evils in great death, to parch poor tongues with thirst and arid drought, or chafe for any lack. Once more, if nature should of a sudden send a voice abroad, and her own self inveigh against us so, mortal, what hast thou of such grave concern that thou indulgest in two sickly plaints? Why this bemoaning and beweeping death? For if thy life aforetime and behind to thee was grateful, and not all thy good was heaped as in sieve to flow away and perish unavailingly, why not, even like a banqueter, depart the halls laden with life? Why not, with mind content, take now, thou fool, thy unafflicted rest? But if whatever thou enjoyed hath been lavished and lost, and life is now offence, why seekest more to add, which in its turn will perish foully and fall out in vain? Oh, why not rather make an end of life, of labour? For all I may devise or find to pleasure thee is nothing. All things are the same forever. Though not yet thy body wrinkles with years, nor yet the frame exhausts outworn, still things abide the same, even if thou goest on to conquer all of time with length of days, yea, if thou never diest. What were our answer, but that nature here urges just suit, and in her words lays down true cause of action? Yet should one complain, riper in years and elder, and lament, poor devil, his death more sorely than is fit, then would she not, with greater right, on him cry out, inveighing with a voice more shrill, Off with thy tears, and choke thy whines, buffoon! Thou wrinklest, after thou hast had the sum of the guerdons of life. Yet, since thou cravest ever what's not at hand, contemning present good, that life has slipped away, unperfected and unavailing unto thee, and now, or ere thou guessed it, death beside thy head stands, and before thou canst be going home sated and laden with the goodly feast. But now yield all that's alien to thine age. Up with good grace, make room for sons, thou must. Justly, I fancy, would ye reason thus, justly inveigh and gird, since ever the old, outcrowded by the new, gives way, and ever the one thing from the others is repaired. Nor no man is consigned to the abyss of Tartarus the black. For stuff must be that thus the after generations grow, though these, their life completed, follow thee. And thus, like thee, are generations all, already fallen, or sometime to fall. So one thing from another rises ever. And in fee simple life is given to none, but unto all mere usufruct. Look back. Nothing to us was all forepast eld of time the eternal, ere we had a birth. And nature holds this like a mirror up of time to be when we are dead and gone. And what is there so horrible appears? Now, what is there so sad about it all? Is't not serener far than any sleep? And verily, those tortures said to be in Acheron the deep, they all are ours here in this life. No Tantalus, benumbed with baseless terror, as the fables tell, fears the huge boulder hanging in the air, but rather, in life, an empty dread of gods urges mortality, and each one fears such fall of fortune as may chance to him. Nor eat the vultures into Titus, prostrate in Acheron, nor can they find, forsooth, throughout eternal ages, aught to pry around for in that mighty breast, however hugely he extend his bulk, who hath for outspread limbs not acres 9, but the whole earth. He shall not able be to bear eternal pain, nor furnish food from his own frame forever. But for us a Tityus is he, whom vultures rend prostrate in love, whom anxious anguish eats, whom troubles of any unappeased desires asunder rip. We have before our eyes, here in this life also, a Sisyphus, in him who seeketh of the populace the rods, the axes fell, and evermore retires a beaten and a gloomy man. For to seek after power, an empty name, nor given at all, and ever in the search to endure a world of toil, oh, this it is, to shove with shoulder up the hill a stone which yet comes rolling back from off the top, and headlong makes for levels of the plain. Then to be always feeding an ingrate mind, filling with good things, satisfying never, as do the seasons of the year for us, when they return and bring their progenies and varied charms, and we are never filled with the fruits of life. Oh, this, I fancy, 'tis to pour, like those young virgins in the tale, waters into a sieve, unfilled forever. Cerberus and Furies, and that lack of light. Tartarus, outbelching from his mouth the surge of horrible heat. The which are nowhere, nor indeed can be. But in this life is fear of retributions just and expiations for evil acts, the dungeon and the leap from that dread rock of infamy, the stripes, the executioners, the oaken rack, the iron plates, bitumen, and the torch. And even though these are absent, yet the mind, with a fore-fearing conscience, plies its goads and burns beneath the lash, nor sees meanwhile what terminus of ills, what end of pine can ever be, and feareth lest the same but grow more heavy after death. Of truth, the life of fools is Acheron on earth. This also to thy very self sometimes repeat thou mayest. Lo, even good Ancus left the sunshine with his eyes, in divers things a better man than thou, O worthless hind. And many other kings and lords of rule thereafter have gone under, once who swayed o'er mighty peoples. And he also, he who whilom paved a highway down the sea, and gave his legionaries thoroughfare along the deep, and taught them how to cross the pools of brine afoot, and did contemn, trampling upon it with his cavalry, the bellowings of ocean, poured his soul from dying body as his light was ta'en. And Scipio's son, the thunderbolt of war, horror of Carthage, gave his bones to earth, like to the lowliest villein in the house. Add finders out of sciences and arts, add comrades of the Heliconian dames, among whom Homer, sceptred o'er them all, now lies in slumber, sunken with the rest. Then, too, Democritus, when ripened eld admonished him his memory waned away, of own accord offered his head to death. Even Epicurus went, his light of life run out, the man ingenious who o'ertopped the human race, extinguishing all others, as sun in ether arisen, all the stars. Wilt thou, then, dally? Thou complain to go? For whom already life's as good as dead, whilst yet thou livest and lookest? Who in sleep wastest thy lifetime's major part, and snorest even when awake, and ceasest not to see the stuff of dreams, and bearest a mind beset by baseless terror, nor discoverest oft what's wrong with thee when, like a sotted wretch, thou art jostled along by many crowding cares, and wanderest reeling round with mind aswim. If men, in that same way as on the mind they feel the load that wearies with its weight, could also know the causes whence it comes, and why so great the heap of ill on heart, oh, not in this sort would they live their life, as now so much we see them, knowing not what 'tis they want, and seeking ever and ever a change of place, as if to drop the burden. The man who sickens of his home goes out, forth from his splendid halls, and straight returns, feeling a faith no better off abroad. He races, driving his Gallic ponies along, down to his villa, madly, as in haste to hurry help to a house afire. At once he yawns as soon as foot has touched the threshold, or drowsily goes off in sleep and seeks forgetfulness, or maybe bustles about and makes for town again. In such a way each human flees himself, a self, in sooth, as happens, he by no means can escape. And willy-nilly he cleaves to it and loathes, sick, and guessing not the cause of ail. Yet should he see but that, chiefly then, leaving all else, he'd study to divine the nature of things, since here is, in debate, eternal time, and not the single hour, mortal's estate, in whatsoever remains after great death. And too, when all is said, what evil lust of life is this so great subdues us to live so dreadfully distraught in perils and alarms? One fixed end of life abideth for mortality. Death's not to shun, and we must go to meet. Besides, we're busied with the same devices ever and ever, and we are at them ever, and there's no new delight that may be forged by living on. But whilst the thing we long for is lacking, that seems good above all else. Thereafter, when we've touched it, something else we long for. Ever one equal thirst of life grips us agape. And doubtful 'tis what fortune the future times may carry, or what be the chance may bring, or what the issue next awaiting us. Nor by prolonging life take we the least away from death's own time, nor can we pluck one moment off, whereby to diminish the aeons of our state of death. Therefore, O man, by living on, fulfill as many generations as thou may. Eternal death shall there be waiting still. And he who died with light of yesterday shall be no briefer time in death's no more than he who perished months or years before. End of Book 3, Part 4. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 4, Part 1 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 4, Part 1. Proem. I wander afield, thriving in sturdy thought, through unpathed haunts of the Pierides, trodden by step of none before. I joy to come on undefiled fountains there, to drain them deep. I joy to pluck new flowers, to seek for this my head a signal crown from regions where the Muses never yet have garlanded the temples of a man. First, since I teach concerning mighty things, and go right on to loose from round the mind the tightened coils of dread religion. Next, since concerning themes so dark, I frame song so pellucid, touching all throughout even with the Muses' charm, which, as 'twould seem, is not without a reasonable ground. For as physicians, when they seek to give young boys the nauseous wormwood, first do touch the brim around the cup with the sweet juice and yellow of the honey, in order that the thoughtless age of boyhood be cajoled as far as the lips, and meanwhile swallow down the wormwood's bitter draught, and, though befooled, be yet not merely duped, but rather thus grow strong again with recreated health. So now I too, since this my doctrine seems in general somewhat woeful unto those who've had it not in hand, and, since the crowd starts back from it in horror, have desired to expound our doctrine unto thee in song, soft-speaking and Pierian, and, as 'twere, to touch it with sweet honey of the muse, if by such method haply I might hold the mind of thee upon these lines of ours, till thou dost learn the nature of all things, and understandest their utility. End of Book 4, Part 1. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 4, Part 2 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 4, Part 2. Existence and Character of the Images. But since I've taught already of what sort the seeds of all things are, and how distinct in divers forms they flit of own accord, stirred with a motion everlasting on, and in what mode things be from them create, and since I've taught what the mind's nature is, and of what things 'tis with the body knit, and thrives in strength, and by what mode uptorn that mind returns to its primordials, now will I undertake an argument, one for these matters of supreme concern, that there exist those somewhats which we call the images of things. These, like to films scaled off the utmost outside of the things, flit hither and thither through the atmosphere, and the same terrify our intellects, coming upon us waking or in sleep, when oft we peer at wonderful strange shapes and images of people lorn of light, which oft have horribly roused us when we lay in slumber. That haply never more may we suppose that souls get loose from Acheron, or shades go floating in among the living, or aught of us is left behind at death, when body and mind, destroyed together, each back to its own primordials goes away. And thus I say that effigies of things and tenuous shapes from off the things are sent, from off the utmost outside of the things, which are like films, or may be named a rind, because the image bears like look and form with whatso body has shed it, fluttering forth. A fact thou mayest, however dull thy wits, well learn from this: mainly, because we see, even 'mongst visible objects, many be that send forth bodies, loosely some diffused, like smoke from oaken logs and heat from fires, and some more interwoven and condensed, as when the locusts in the summer time put off their glossy tunics, or when calves at birth drop membranes from their body's surface, or when again the slippery serpent doffs its vestments mongst the thorns, for oft we see the briers augmented with their flying spoils. Since such takes place, 'tis likewise certain too that tenuous images from things are sent, from off the utmost outside of the things. For why those kinds should drop and part from things, rather than others tenuous and thin, no power has man to open mouth to tell, especially since on outsides of things are bodies many and minute, which could, in the same order which they had before, and with the figure of their form preserved, be thrown abroad, and much more swiftly too, being less subject to impediments, as few in number, and placed along the front. For truly, many things we see discharge their stuff at large, not only from their cores deep set within, as we have said above, but from their surfaces at times no less, their very colours too. And commonly the awnings, saffron, red, and dusky blue, stretched overhead in mighty theatres, upon their poles and crossbeams fluttering, have such an action quite. For there they dye and make to undulate with their every hue the circled throng below, and all the stage and rich attire in the patrician seats. And ever the more the theatre's dark walls around them shut, the more all things within laugh in the bright suffusion of strange glints, the daylight being withdrawn. And therefore, since the canvas hangings thus discharge their dye from off their surface, things in general must likewise their tenuous effigies discharge, because in either case they are off thrown from off the surface. So there are indeed such certain prints and vestiges of forms which flit around, of subtlest texture made, invisible when separate, each and one. Again, all odour, smoke, and heat and such streams out of things diffusedly, because, whilst coming from the deeps of body forth and rising out, along their bending path they're torn asunder, nor have gateways straight, wherethrough to mass themselves and struggle abroad. But, contrariwise, when such a tenuous film of outside colour is thrown off, there's naught can rend it, since 'tis placed along the front, ready to hand. Lastly, those images, which to our eyes in mirrors do appear, in water, or in any shining surface, must be, since furnished with like look of things, fashioned from images of things sent out. There are, then, tenuous effigies of forms, like unto them, which no one can divine when taken singly, which do yet give back, when by continued and recurrent discharge expelled, a picture from the mirror's plane. Nor otherwise, it seems, can they be kept so well conserved, that thus be given back figures so like each object. Now then, learn how tenuous is the nature of an image. And in the first place, since primordials be so far beneath our senses, and much less e'en than those objects which begin to grow too small for eyes to note, learn now in few how nice are the beginnings of all things. That this too I may yet confirm in proof. First, living creatures are sometimes so small that even their third part can nowise be seen. Judge, then, the size of any inward organ. What of their sphered heart, their eyes, their limbs, the skeleton? How tiny thus they are! And what besides of those first particles, whence soul and mind must fashioned be? Seest not how nice and how minute? Besides, whatever exhales from out its body a sharp smell, the nauseous absinthe, or the panacea, strong southernwood, or bitter centaury, if never so lightly with thy fingers twain perchance thou touch a one of them, then why not rather know that images flit hither and thither, many, in many modes, bodiless and invisible? But lest haply thou holdest that those images which come from objects are the sole that flit, others indeed there be, of own accord begot, self-formed in earth's airy skies, which moulded to innumerable shapes are borne aloft, and fluid as they are, cease not to change appearance, and to turn into new outlines of all sorts of forms. As we behold the clouds grow thick on high, and smirch the serene vision of the world, stroking the air with motions. For oft are seen the giants' faces flying far along, and trailing a spread of shadow, and at times the mighty mountains and mountain-sundered rocks going before and crossing on the sun, whereafter a monstrous beast dragging amain and leading in the other thunderheads. Now hear how easy and how swift they be engendered, and perpetually flow off from things, and gliding pass away. Forever every outside streams away from off all objects, since discharge they may. And when this outside reaches other things, as chiefly glass, it passes through. But where it reaches the rough rocks or stuff of wood, there 'tis so rent that it cannot give back an image. But when gleaming objects dense, as chiefly mirrors, have been set before it, nothing of this sort happens, for it can't go as through glass, nor yet be rent, its safety by virtue of that smoothness being sure. 'Tis therefore that from them the images stream back to us, and howso suddenly thou place at any instant anything before a mirror, there an image shows, proving that ever from a body's surface flow off thin textures and thin shapes of things. Thus many images in little time are gendered, so their origin is named rightly a speedy. And even as the sun must send below in little time to earth so many beams to keep all things so full of light incessant, thus, on grounds the same, from things there must be born in many modes to every quarter round upon the moment the many images of things, because unto whatever face of things we turn the mirror, things of form and hue the same respond. Besides, though but a moment since serenest was the weather of the sky, so fiercely sudden is it foully thick, that ye might think that round about all murk had parted forth from Acheron, and filled the mighty vaults of sky, so grievously as gathers thus the storm cloud's gruesome night, do faces of black horror hang on high, of which how small a part an image is, there's none to tell or reckon out in words. Now come, with what swift motion they are borne, these images, and what the speed assigned to them across the breezes swimming on, so that o'er lengths of space a little hour alone is wasted, toward whatever region each with its divers impulse tends, I'll tell in verses sweeter than they many are, even as the swan's slight note is better far than that dispersed clamor of the cranes among the south wind's airy clouds. And first, one oft may see that objects which are light and made of tiny bodies are the swift, in which class is the sun's light and his heat, since made from small primordial elements, which, as it were, are forward knocked along and through the interspaces of the air to pass delay not, urged by blows behind. For light by light is instantly supplied, and gleam by following gleam is spurred and driven. Thus likewise must the images have power through unimaginable space to speed within a point of time. First, since a cause exceeding small there is, which at their back far forward drives them and propels, whereto they're carried with such winged lightness on. And secondly, since furnished, when sent off, with texture of such rareness that they can through objects whatsoever penetrate, and ooze, as 'twere, through intervening air. Besides, if those fine particles of things, which from so deep within are sent abroad, as light and heat of sun, are seen to glide and spread themselves through all the space of heaven upon one instant of the day, and fly o'er sea and lands and flood the heaven, what then of those which on the outside stand prepared, when they're hurled off with not a thing to check their going out? Dost thou not see indeed how swifter and how farther must they go, and speed through manifold the length of space, in time the same that from the sun the rays o'erspread the heaven? This also seems to be example chief and true with what swift speed the images of things are borne about, that soon as ever under open skies is spread the shining water, all at once, if stars be out in heaven, up gleam from earth, serene and radiant in the water there, the constellations of the universe. Now seest thou not in what a point of time an image from the shores of ether falls unto the shores of earth. Wherefore, again, and yet again, 'tis needful to confess with wondrous. End of Book 4, Part 2. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 4, Part 3 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus. Translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 4, Part 3. The Senses and Mental Pictures. Bodies that strike the eyes, a waking sight. From certain things flow odors evermore, as cold from rivers, heat from sun, and spray from waves of ocean, eater out of walls around the coasts. Nor ever cease to flit the varied voices, sounds athrough the air. Then, too, there comes into the mouth at times the wet of a salt taste, when by the sea we roam about. And so, whene'er we watch the wormwood being mixed, its bitter stings. To such degree, from all things is each thing borne streamingly along, and sent about to every region round. And nature grants nor rest nor respite of the onward flow, since 'tis incessantly we feeling have, and all the time are suffered to descry and smell all things at hand, and hear them sound. Besides, since shape, examined by our hands within the dark, is known to be the same as that by eyes perceived within the light and lustrous day, both touch and sight must be by one like cause aroused. So, if we test a square and get its stimulus on us within the dark, within the light, what square can fall upon our sight except a square that images the things? Wherefore, it seems the source of seeing is in images, nor without these can anything be viewed. Now, these same films I name are borne about and tossed and scattered into regions all. But since we do perceive alone through eyes, it follows hence that whitherso we turn our sight, all things do strike against it there with form and hue. And just how far from us each thing may be away, the image yields to us the power to see and chance to tell. For when 'tis sent, at once it shoves ahead and drives along the air that's in the space betwixt it and our eyes. And thus this air all glides a-through our eyeballs, and, as 'twere, brushes a-through our pupils, and thus wise passes across. Therefore it comes we see how far from us each thing may be away. And the more air there be that's driven before, and to the longer be the brushing breeze against our eyes, the farther off removed each thing is seen to be. Forsooth, this work with mightily swift order all goes on, so that upon one instant we may see what kind the object, and how far away. Nor over marvellous must this be deemed in these affairs, that though the films which strike upon the eyes cannot be singly seen, the things themselves may be perceived. For thus, when the wind beats upon us stroke by stroke, and when the sharp cold streams, 'tis not our wont to feel each private particle of wind or of that cold, but rather all at once. And so we see how blows affect our body, as if one thing were beating on the same, and giving us the feel of its own body outside of us. Again, whene'er we thump with finger-tip upon a stone, we touch but the rock's surface and the outer hue, nor feel that hue by contact, rather feel the very hardness deep within the rock. Now come. And why beyond a looking-glass an image may be seen, perceive. For seen it soothly is, removed far within. 'Tis the same sort as objects peered upon outside in their true shape, whene'er a door yields through itself an open peering place, and lets us see so many things outside beyond the house. Also that sight is made by a twofold twin air. For first is seen the air inside the doorposts, next the doors, the twain to left and right, and afterwards a light beyond comes brushing through our eyes, then other air, then objects peered upon outside in their true shape. And thus, when first the image of the glass projects itself, as to our gaze it comes, it shoves ahead and drives along the air that's in the space betwixt it and our eyes, and brings to pass that we perceive the air, ere yet the glass. But when we've also seen the glass itself, forthwith that image which from us is born reaches the glass, and there, thrown back again, comes back unto our eyes, and driving rolls ahead of itself another air, that then 'tis this we see before itself, and thus it looks so far removed behind the glass. Wherefore again there's naught for wonder in those which render from the mirror's plane the vision back, since each thing comes to pass by means of the two airs. Now, in the glass, the right part of our members is observed upon the left, because when comes the image hitting against the level of the glass, 'tis not returned unshifted, but forced off backwards in line direct, and not oblique, exactly as whoso his plaster mask should dash before 'twere dry on post or beam, and it should straightway keep at clinging there its shape reversed, facing him who threw, and so remould the features it gives back. It comes that now the right eye is the left the right. An image, too, may be from mirror into mirror handed on, until of idle films even 5 or 6 have thus been gendered. For whatever things shall hide back yonder in the house, the same, however far removed in twisting ways, may still be all brought forth through bending paths, and by these several mirrors seen to be within the house, since nature so compels all things to be borne backward and spring off at equal angles from all other things. To such degree the image gleams across from mirror unto mirror, where 'twas left it comes to be the right, and then again returns and changes round unto the left. Again, those little sides of mirrors curved, proportionate to the bulge of our own flank, send back to us their idols with the right upon the right. And this is so because either the image is passed on along from mirror unto mirror, and thereafter, when twice dashed off, flies back unto ourselves, or else the image wheels itself around when once unto the mirror it is come, since the curved surface teaches it to turn to usward. Further, thou mightest well believe that these film idols step along with us, and set their feet in unison with ours, and imitate our carriage, since from that part of a mirror whence thou hast withdrawn, straightway no images can be returned. Further, our eyeballs tend to flee the bright, and shun to gaze thereon. The sun even blinds, if thou goest on to strain them unto him, because his strength is mighty, and the films heavily downward from on high are borne through the pure ether and the viewless winds, and strike the eyes, disordering their joints. So piercing lustre often burns the eyes, because it holdeth many seeds of fire, which working into eyes engender pain. Again, whatever jaundiced people view becomes wan yellow, since from out their bodies flow many seeds wan yellow forth to meet the films of things, and many too are mixed within their eye, which by contagion paint all things with sallowness. Again, we view from dark recesses things that stand in light, because when first has entered and possessed the open eyes this nearer darkling air, swiftly the shining air and luminous followeth in, which purges then the eyes and scatters asunder of that other air the sable shadows. For in large degrees this air is nimbler, nicer, and more strong. And soon as ever 'thas filled and oped with light the pathways of the eyeballs, which before black air had blocked, there follow straightaway those films of things out standing in the light, provoking vision, what we cannot do from out the light with objects in the dark, because that denser darkling air behind followeth in, and fills each aperture, and thus blockades the pathways of the eyes, that there no images of any things can be thrown in and agitate the eyes. And when from far away we do behold the squared towers of a city, oft rounded they seem, on this account because each distant angle is perceived obtuse, or rather it is not perceived at all, and perishes its blow, nor to our gaze arrives its stroke, since through such length of air are borne along the idols that the air makes blunt the idol of the angle's point by numerous collidings. When thuswise the angles of the tower, each and all, have quite escaped the sense, the stones appear as rubbed and rounded on a turner's wheel, yet not like objects near and truly round, but with a semblance to them, shadowily. Likewise our shadow in the sun appears to move along and follow our own steps and imitate our carriage, if thou thinkest air that is thus bereft of light can walk, following the gait and motion of mankind. For what we use to name a shadow sure is naught but air deprived of light. No marvel, because the earth from spot to spot is reft progressively of light of sun, whenever, in moving round, we get within its way, while any spot of earth by us abandoned is filled with light again. On this account it comes to pass that what was body's shadow seems still the same to follow after us in one straight course. Since evermore pour in new lights of rays, and perish then the old, just like the wool that's drawn into the flame. Therefore the earth is easily spoiled of light, and easily refilled, and from herself washeth the black shadows quite away. And yet in this we don't at all concede that eyes be cheated, for their task it is to note in whatsoever place be light, in what be shadow, whether or no the gleams be still the same, and whether the shadow which just now was here is that one passing thither, or whether the facts be what we said above. 'Tis after all the reasoning of mind that must decide, nor can our eyeballs know the nature of reality. And so attach thou not this fault of mind to eyes, nor lightly think our senses everywhere are tottering. The ship in which we sail is borne along, although it seems to stand. The ship that bides in roadstead is supposed there to be passing by, and hills and fields seem fleeing fast astern, past which we urge the ship and fly under the bellying sails. The stars, each one, do seem to pause, affixed to the ethereal caverns, though they all forever are in motion, rising out, and thence revisiting their far descents when they have measured with their bodies bright the span of heaven. And likewise sun and moon seem biding in a roadstead, objects which, as plain fact proves, are really borne along. Between two mountains far away, aloft from midst the whirl of waters open lies a gaping exit for the fleet, and yet they seem conjoined in a single aisle. When boys themselves have stopped their spinning round, the halls still seem to whirl and posts to reel, until they now must almost think the roofs threaten to ruin down upon their heads. And now, when nature begins to lift on high the sun's red splendor and the tremulous fires, and raise him o'er the mountain tops, those mountains, o'er which he seemeth then to thee to be, his glowing self hard by attinging them with his own fire, are yet away from us scarcely 2,000 arrow shots, indeed oft scarce 500 courses of a dart, although between those mountains and the sun lie the huge plains of ocean spread beneath the vasty shores of ether, and intervene 1,000 lands, possessed by many a folk and generations of wild beasts. Again, a pool of water of but a finger's depth, which lies between the stones along the pave, offers a vision downward into earth as far as from the earth o'erspread on high the gulfs of heaven, that thus thou seemest to view clouds down below, and heavenly bodies plunged wondrously in heaven under earth. Then, too, when in the middle of the stream sticks fast our dashing horse, and down we gaze into the river's rapid waves, some force seems then to bear the body of the horse, though standing still, reversely from his course, and swiftly push up stream. And wheresoe'er we cast our eyes across, all objects seem thus to be onward borne, and flow along in the same way as we. A portico, albeit it stands well propped from end to end on equal columns, parallel and big, contracts by stages in a narrow cone, when from one end the long, long hole is seen, until, conjoining ceiling with the floor, and the whole right side with the left, it draws together to a cone's nigh viewless point. To sailors on the main, the sun, he seems from out the waves to rise, and in the waves to set and bury his light, because indeed they gaze on naught but water and the sky. Again, to gazers ignorant of the sea, vessels in port seem as with broken poops to lean upon the water, quite agog. For any portion of the oars that's raised above the briny spray is straight, and straight the rudders from above. But other parts, those sunk, immersed below the waterline, seem broken all, and bended, and inclined sloping to upwards, and turned back to float almost atop the water. And when the winds carry the scattered drifts along the sky in the night time, then seem to glide along the radiant constellations 'gainst the clouds, and there on high to take far other course from that whereon in truth they're borne. And then, if haply our hand be set beneath one eye, and press below thereon, then to our gaze each object which we gaze on seems to be, by some sensation, twain. Then twain the lights of lampions burgeoning in flowers of flame, and twain the furniture in all the house, twofold the visages of fellow men, and twain their bodies. And again, when sleep has bound our members down in slumber soft, and all the body lies in deep repose, yet then we seem to self to be awake and move our members, and in night's blind gloom we think to mark the daylight and the sun, and shut within a room, yet still we seem to change our skies, our oceans, rivers, hills, to cross the plains afoot and hear new sounds, though still the austere silence of the night abides around us, and to speak replies, though voiceless. Other cases of the sort, wondrously many do we see, which all seek, so to say, to injure faith in sense. In vain, because the largest part of these deceives through mere opinions of the mind, which we do add ourselves, feigning to see what by the senses are not seen at all. For naught is harder than to separate plain facts from dubious, which the mind forthwith adds by itself. Again, if one suppose that naught is known, he knows not whether this itself is able to be known, since he confesses naught to know. Therefore with him I waive discussion, who has set his head even where his feet should be. But let me grant that this he knows. I question, whence he knows what 'tis to know and not to know in turn, and what created concept of the truth, and what device has proved the dubious to differ from the certain, since in things he's heretofore seen naught of true. Thou'lt find that from the senses first hath been create concept of truth, nor can the senses be rebutted. For criterion must be found worthy of greater trust, which shall defeat through own authority the false by true. What then than these our senses must there be worthy a greater trust? Shall reason, sprung from some false sense, prevail to contradict those senses, sprung as reason wholly is from out the senses? For lest these be true, all reason also then is falsified. Or shall the ears have power to blame the eyes, or yet the touch, the ears? Again, shall taste accuse this touch, or shall the nose confute, or eyes defeat it? Methinks not so it is, for unto each has been divided off its function quite apart, its power to each. And thus we're still constrained to perceive the soft, the cold, the hot apart all divers hues, and whatso things there be conjoined with hues. Likewise, the tasting tongue has its own power apart, and smells apart, and sounds apart are known. And thus it is that no one sense can e'er convict another. Nor shall one sense have power to blame itself, because it always must be deemed the same, worthy of equal trust. And therefore, what at any time unto these senses showed, the same is true. And if the reason be unable to unravel us the cause why objects which at hand were square afar seem rounded, yet it more availeth us, lacking the reason, to pretend a cause for each configuration, than to let from out our hands escape the obvious things, and injure primal faith in sense, and wreck all those foundations upon which do rest our life and safety. For not only reason would topple down, but even our very life would straightway collapse, unless we dared to trust our senses and to keep away from headlong heights and places to be shunned of a like peril, and to seek with speed their opposites. Again, as in a building, if the first plumb line be askew, and if the square, deceiving, swerve from lines exact, and if the level waver but the least in any part, the whole construction then must turn out faulty, shelving and askew, leaning to back and front, incongruous, that now some portions seem about to fall, and falls the whole ere long, betrayed indeed by first deceiving estimates. So too, thy calculations in affairs of life must be askew and false, if sprung for thee from senses false. So all that troop of words, marshalled against the senses, is quite vain. And now remains to demonstrate with ease how other senses each their things perceive. Firstly, a sound, and every voice is heard when, getting into ears, they strike the sense with their own body. For confess we must, even voice and sound, to be corporeal, because they're able on the sense to strike. Besides, voice often scrapes against the throat, and screams in going out do make more rough the windpipe, naturally enough, methinks, when through the narrow exit, rising up in larger throng, these primal germs of voice have thus begun to issue forth. In sooth, also the door of the mouth is scraped against by air blown outward from distended cheeks. And thus no doubt there is that voice and words consist of elements corporeal, with power to pain. Nor art thou unaware likewise how much of bodies ta'en away, how much from very thews and powers of men may be withdrawn by steady talk, prolonged even from the rising splendor of the morn to shadows of black evening. Above all, if 't be outpoured with most exceeding shouts. Therefore the voice must be corporeal, since the long talker loses from his frame a part. Moreover, roughness in the sound comes from the roughness in the primal germs, as a smooth sound from smooth ones is create. Nor have these elements a form the same when the trump rumbles with a hollow roar, as when barbaric Berecynthian pipe buzzes with raucous boomings, or when swans, by night, from icy shores of Helicon, with wailing voices raise their liquid dirge. Thus, when from deep within our frame we force these voices, and at mouth expel them forth, the mobile tongue, artificer of words, makes them articulate, and, too, the lips, by their formations, share in shaping them. Hence, when the space is short from starting point to where that voice arrives, the very words must too be plainly heard, distinctly marked. For then the voice conserves its own formation, conserves its shape. But if the space between be longer than is fit, the words must be through the much air confounded, and the voice disordered in its flight across the winds. And so it haps that thou canst sound perceive, yet not determine what the words may mean. To such degree confounded and encumbered the voice approaches us. Again, one word sent from the crier's mouth may rouse all ears among the populace, and thus one voice scatters asunder into many voices, since it divides itself for separate ears, imprinting form of word and a clear tone. But whatso part of voices fails to hit the ears themselves perishes, borne beyond, idly diffused among the winds. A part, beating on solid porticos, tossed back returns a sound, and sometimes mocks the ear with a mere phantom of a word. When this thou well hast noted, thou canst render count unto thyself and others why it is, along the lonely places, that the rocks give back like shapes of words in order like, when search we after comrades wandering among the shady mountains, and aloud call unto them the scattered. I have seen spots that gave back even voices 6 or 7 for one thrown forth. For so the very hills, dashing them back against the hills, kept on with their reverberations. And these spots the neighbouring countryside doth feign to be haunts of the goat-foot satyrs and the nymphs, and tells ye there be fauns, by whose night noise and antic revels yonder, they declare, the voiceless silences are broken oft, and tones of strings are made, and wailings sweet, which the pipe, beat by players' finger-tips, pours out. And far and wide the farmer race begins to hear, when, shaking the garmentings of pine upon his half-beast head, god Pan, with puckered lip, oft runneth o'er and o'er the open reeds, lest flute should cease to pour the woodland music. Other prodigies and wonders of this ilk they love to tell, lest they be thought to dwell in lonely spots, and even by gods deserted. This is why they boast of marvels in their story-tellings, or by some other reason are led on, greedy as all mankind hath ever been, to prattle fables into ears. Again, one need not wonder how it comes about that through those places through which eyes cannot view objects manifest, sounds yet may pass and assail the ears. For often we observe people conversing, though the doors be closed. No marvel either, since all voice unharmed can wind through bended apertures of things, while idle films decline to, for they're rent, unless along straight apertures they swim, like those in glass, through which all images do fly across. And yet this voice itself in passing through shut chambers of a house, is dulled, and in a jumble enters ears, and sound we seem to hear far more than words. Moreover, a voice is into all directions divided up, since off from one another new voices are engendered, when one voice hath once leapt forth, outstarting into many, as oft a spark of fire is wont to sprinkle itself into its several fires. And so voices do fill those places hid behind, which all are in a hubbub round about, astir with sound. But idle films do tend, as once sent forth, in straight directions all. Wherefore one can inside a wall see naught, yet catch the voices from beyond the same. Nor tongue and palate, whereby we flavour feel, present more problems for more work of thought. Firstly, we feel a flavour in the mouth when forth we squeeze it in chewing up our food, as any one, perchance, begins to squeeze with hand and dry a sponge with water soaked. Next, all which forth we squeeze is spread about along the pores and intertwined paths of the loose-textured tongue, and so, when smooth the bodies of the oozy flavour, then delightfully they touch, delightfully they treat all spots around the wet and trickling enclosures of the tongue. And, contrariwise, they sting and pain the sense with their assault, according as with roughness they're supplied. Next, only up to palate is the pleasure coming from flavour. For in truth, when down 'thas plunged along the throat, no pleasure is, whilst into all the frame it spreads around. Nor aught it matters with what food is fed the body, if only what thou take thou canst distribute well digested to the frame, and keep the stomach in a moist career. Now, how it is we see some food for some, others for others, I will unfold. Or wherefore what to some is foul and bitter, yet the same to others can seem delectable to eat. Why here so great the distance and the difference is, that what is food to one, to some becomes fierce poison, as a certain snake there is, which, touched by spittle of a man, will waste and end itself by gnawing up its coil. Again, fierce poison is the hellebore to us, but puts the fat on goats and quails. That thou mayest know by what devices this is brought about, in chief thou must recall what we have said before, that seeds are kept co-mixed in things in divers modes. Again, as all the breathing creatures which take food are outwardly unlike, and outer cut and contour of their members bounds them round, each differing kind by kind, they thus consist of seeds of varying shape. And furthermore, since seeds do differ, divers too must be the interstices and paths, which we do call the apertures, in all the members, even in mouth and palate too. Thus some must be more small, or yet more large, three-cornered some, and others squared, and many others round, and certain of them many-angled too, in many modes. For as the combination and motion of their divers shapes demand, the shapes of apertures must be diverse, and paths must vary according to their walls that bound them. Hence, when what is sweet to some becomes to others bitter, for him to whom 'tis sweet, the smoothest particles must needs have entered caressingly the palate's pores. And, contrariwise, with those to whom that sweet is sour within the mouth, beyond a doubt the rough and barbed particles have got into the narrows of the apertures. Now easy it is from these affairs to know, whatever indeed where one from o'er-abundant bile is stricken with fever, or in otherwise feels the roused violence of some malady, there the whole frame is now upset, and there all the positions of the seeds are changed, so that the bodies which before were fit to cause the savour now are fit no more, and now more apt are others which be able to get within the pores and gender sour. Both sorts, in sooth, are intermixed in honey, what oft we've proved above to thee before. Now come, and I will indicate what wise impact of odour on the nostrils touches. And first, 'tis needful there be many things from whence the streaming flow of varied odours may roll along, and we're constrained to think they stream and dart and sprinkle themselves about impartially. But for some breathing creatures one odour is more apt, to others another, because of differing forms of seeds and pores. Thus, on and on along the zephyrs, bees are led by odour of honey, vultures too by carcasses. Again, the forward power of scent in dogs doth lead the hunter on whithersoever the splay foot of wild beast hath hastened its career, and the white goose, the saviour of the Roman citadel, forescents afar the odour of mankind. Thus, diversely to divers ones is given peculiar smell that leadeth each along to his own food, or makes him start aback from loathsome poison. And in this wise are the generations of the wild preserved. Yet is this pungence not alone in odours, or in the class of flavours, but likewise the look of things and hues agree not all so well with senses unto all, but that some unto some will be, to gaze upon, more keen and painful. Lo, the raving lions, they dare not face and gaze upon the cock, who's wont with wings to flap away the night from off the stage, and call the beaming morn with clarion voice. And lions straightway thus bethink themselves of flight, because, ye see, within the body of the cocks there be some certain seeds, which into lions' eyes injected bore into the pupils deep, and yield such piercing pain they can't hold out against the cocks, however fierce they be. Whilst yet these seeds can't hurt our gaze the least, either because they do not penetrate, or since they have free exit from the eyes as soon as penetrating, so that thus they cannot hurt our eyes in any part by their remaining. To speak once more of odour, whatever assail the nostrils, some can travel a longer way than others. None of them, however, is borne so far as sound or voice, while I omit all mention of such things as hit the eyesight and assail the vision. For slowly on a wandering course it comes, and perishes sooner, by degrees absorbed easily into all the winds of air. And first, because from deep inside the thing it is discharged with labour. For the fact that every object, when 'tis shivered, ground, or crumbled by the fire, will smell the stronger, is sign that odours flow and part away from inner regions of the things. And next, thou mayest see that odour is create of larger primal germs than voice, because it enters not through stony walls, wherethrough unfailingly the voice and sound are born. Wherefore, besides, thou wilt observe, 'tis not so easy to trace out in whatso place the smelling object is. For dallying on along the winds, the particles cool off, and then the scurrying messengers of things arrive our senses when no longer hot. So dogs oft wander astray, and hunt the scent. Now mark, and hear what objects move the mind, and learn in view whence unto intellect do come what come. And first I tell thee this, that many images of objects rove in many modes to every region round, so thin that easily the one with other, when once they meet, uniteth in mid-air, like gossamer or gold leaf. For indeed far thinner are they in their fabric than those images which take a hold on eyes and smite the vision, since through body's pores they penetrate, and inwardly stir up the subtle nature of mind and smite the sense. Thus centaurs and the limbs of Scyllas, thus the Cerberus visages of dogs we see, and images of people gone before, dead men whose bones earth bosomed long ago, because the images of every kind are everywhere about us born, in part those which are gendered in the very air of own accord, in part those others which from divers things do part away, and those which are compounded, made from out their shapes. Forsoothly, from no living centaur is that phantom gendered, since no breed of beast like him was ever. But when images of horse and man by chance have come together, they easily cohere, as aforesaid, at once, through subtle nature and fabric thin. In the same fashion others of this ilk created are, and when they're quickly born in their exceeding lightness, easily, as earlier I showed, one subtle image, compounded, moves by its one blow the mind, itself so subtle and so strangely quick. That these things come to pass, as I record, from this thou easily canst understand. So far as one is unto other like, seeing with mind as well as with the eyes, must come to pass in fashion not unlike. Well now, since I have shown that I perceive haply a lion through those idle films such as assail my eyes, 'tis thine to know also the mind is in like manner moved, and sees nor more nor less than eyes do see, except that it perceives more subtle films, the lion and aught else through idle films. And when the sleep has overset our frame, the mind's intelligence is now awake, still for no other reason save that these, the self-same films as when we are awake, assail our minds, to such degree indeed that we do seem to see for sure the man whom, void of life, now death and earth have gained dominion over. And nature forces this to come to pass because the body's senses are resting, thwarted through the members all, unable now to conquer false with true, and memory lies prone and languishes in slumber, nor protests that he, the man whom the mind feigns to see alive, long since hath been the gain of death and dissolution. And further, 'tis no marvel idols move and toss their arms and other members round in rhythmic time, and often in men's sleeps it haps an image this is seen to do. In sooth, when perishes the former image, and other is gendered of another pose, that former seemeth to have changed its gestures. Of course, the change must be conceived as speedy, so great the swiftness, and so great the store of idle things, and, in an instant brief as mind can mark, so great again the store of separate idle parts to bring supplies. It happens also that there is supplied sometimes an image not of kind the same, but what before was woman now at hand is seen to stand there altered into male, or other visage, other age succeeds. But slumber and oblivion take care that we shall feel no wonder at the thing. And much in these affairs demands inquiry, and much illumination, if we crave with plainness to exhibit facts. And first, why doth the mind of one to whom the whim to think has come behold forthwith that thing? Or do the idols watch upon our will, and doth an image unto us occur directly we desire? If heart prefer the sea, the land, or after all the sky, assemblies of the citizens, parades, banquets, and battles, these and all, doth she, nature, create and furnish at our word? Maugre the fact that in same place and spot another's mind is meditating things all far unlike. And what again of this, when we in sleep behold the idol's step in measure, forward moving supple limbs, whilst forth they put each supple arm in turn with speedy motion, and with eyeing heads repeat the movement, as the foot keeps time? Forsooth, the idols, they are steeped in art, and wander to and fro well taught indeed. Thus, to be able in the time of night to make such games. Or will the truth be this? Because in one least moment that we mark, that is, the uttering of a single sound, there lurk yet many moments, which the reason discovers to exist. Therefore it comes that, in a moment howso brief ye will, the divers idols are hard by, and ready, each in its place diverse. So great the swiftness, so great again the store of idle things. And so, when perishes the former image, and other is gendered of another pose, the former seemeth to have changed its gestures. And since they be so tenuous, mind can mark sharply alone the ones it strains to see, and thus the rest do perish one and all, save those for which the mind prepares itself. Further, it doth prepare itself indeed, and hopes to see what follows after each, hence this result. For hast thou not observed how eyes, essaying to perceive the fine, will strain in preparation, otherwise unable sharply to perceive at all? Yet know thou canst that even in objects plain, if thou attendest not, 'tis just the same as if 'twere all the time removed and far. What marvel, then, that mind doth lose the rest, save those to which 'thas given up itself? So 'tis that we conjecture from small signs things wide and weighty, and involve ourselves in snarls of self-deceit. End of Book 4, Part 3. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 4, Part 4 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus, translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 4, Part 4. Some Vital Functions. In these affairs we crave that thou wilt passionately flee the one offence, and anxiously wilt shun the error of presuming the clear lights of eyes created were that we might see, Or thighs and knees a prop upon the feet, thus wise can bended be, that we might step with goodly strides ahead. Or forearms joined unto the sturdy uppers, or serving hands on either side were given, that we might do life's own demands. All such interpretation is aft for fore with inverse reasoning, since naught is born in body so that we may use the same, but birth engenders use. No seeing ere the lights of eyes were born, no speaking ere the tongue created was. But origin of tongue came long before discourse of words, and ears created were much earlier than any sound was heard, and all the members, so meseems, were there before they got their use, and therefore they could not be gendered for the sake of use. But contrariwise, contending in the fight with hand to hand, and rending of the joints, and fouling of the limbs with gore, was there, long before the gleaming spears ere flew, and nature prompted man to shun a wound, before the left arm by the aid of art opposed the shielding targe. And verily, yielding the weary body to repose, far ancienter than cushions of soft beds, and quenching thirst is earlier than cups. These objects, therefore, which for use and life have been devised, can be conceived as found for sake of using. But apart from such are all which first were born, and afterwards gave knowledge of their own utility, chief in which sort we note the senses, limbs. Wherefore again 'tis quite beyond thy power to hold that these could thus have been create for office of utility. Likewise 'tis nothing strange that all the breathing creatures seek, even by nature of their frame, their food. Yes, since I've taught thee that from off the things stream and depart innumerable bodies, in modes innumerable too. But most must be the bodies streaming from the living, which bodies, vexed by motion evermore, are through the mouth exhaled innumerable when weary creatures pant, or through the sweat squeezed forth innumerable from deep within. Thus body rarefies, so undermined in all its nature, and pain attends its state. And so the food is taken to underprop the tottering joints, and by its interfusion to recreate their powers, and there stop up the longing, open-mouthed through limbs and veins, for eating. And the moist no less departs into all regions that demand the moist, and many heaped up particles of hot, which cause such burnings in these bellies of ours, the liquid, on arriving, dissipates and quenches like a fire, that parching heat no longer now can scorch the frame. And so thou seest how panting thirst is washed away from off our body, how the hunger pang, it too appeased. Now, how it comes that we, whene'er we wish, can step with strides ahead, and how 'tis given to move our limbs about, and what device is wont to push ahead this, the big load of our corporeal frame, I'll say to thee. Do thou attend what's said. I say that first some idle films of walking into our mind do fall, and smite the mind, as said before. Thereafter will arises, for no one starts to do a thing before the intellect previsions what it wills, and what it there previsioneth depends on what that image is. When, therefore, mind doth so bestir itself that it doth will to go and step along, it strikes at once that energy of soul that's sown about in all the body through the limbs and frame. And this is easy of performance, since the soul is close conjoined with the mind. Next, soul in turn strikes body, and by degrees thus the whole mass is pushed along and moved. Then, too, the body rarefies, and air, forsooth as ever of such nimbleness, comes on and penetrates aboundingly through opened pores, and thus is sprinkled round unto all smallest places in our frame. Thus, then, by these twain factors severally, body is borne like ship, with oars and wind. Nor yet in these affairs is aught for wonder that particles so fine can whirl around so great a body and turn this weight of ours. For wind, so tenuous with its subtle body, yet pushes, driving on the mighty ship of mighty bulk. One hand directs the same, whatever its momentum, and one helm whirls it around whither ye please. And loads, many and huge, are moved and hoisted high by enginery of pulley blocks and wheels, with but light strain. Now, by what modes this sleep pours through our members waters of repose, and frees the breast from cares of mind, I'll tell, in verses sweeter than they many are, even as the swan's slight note is better far than that dispersed clamour of the cranes among the south wind's airy clouds. Do thou give me sharp ears and a sagacious mind, that thou mayest not deny the things to be whereof I'm speaking, nor depart away with bosom scorning these, the spoken truths, thyself at fault, unable to perceive. Sleep chiefly comes when energy of soul hath now been scattered through the frame, and part expelled abroad and gone away, and part crammed back and settling deep within the frame, whereafter then our loosened members droop. For doubt is none that by the work of soul exist in us this sense, and when by slumber that sense is thwarted, we are bound to think the soul confounded and expelled abroad. Yet not entirely, else the frame would lie drenched in the everlasting cold of death. In sooth, where no one part of soul remained lurking among the members, even as fire lurks buried under many ashes, whence could sense amain rekindled be in members, as flame can rise anew from unseen fire? By what devices this strange state and new may be occasioned, and by what the soul can be confounded and the frame grow faint, I will untangle. See to it, thou, that I pour forth my words not unto empty winds. In first place, body on its outer parts, since these are touched by neighbouring airy gusts, must there be thumped and strook by blows of air repeatedly, and therefore almost all are covered either with hides or else with shells, or with the horny callus, or with bark. Yet this same air lashes their inner parts, when creatures draw a breath or blow it out. Wherefore, since body thus is flogged alike upon the inside and the out, and blows come in upon us through the little pores, even inward to our body's primal parts and primal elements, there comes to pass by slow degrees along our members then a kind of overthrow. For then confounded are those arrangements of the primal germs of body and of mind. It comes to pass that next a part of soul's expelled abroad, a part retreateth in recesses hid, a part too scattered all about the frame, cannot become united, nor engage in interchange of motion. Nature now so hedges off approaches and the paths, and thus the sense, its motions all deranged, retires down deep within. And, since there's naught, as 'twere, to prop the frame, the body weakens, and all the members languish, and the arms and eyelids fall. And as ye lie abed, even there the hocks will sag and lose their powers. Again, sleep follows after food, because the food produces same result as air, whilst being scattered round through all the veins. And much the heaviest is that slumber which full or fatigued thou takest, since 'tis then that the most bodies disarrange themselves, bruised by labours hard. And in same wise this threefold change, a forcing of the soul down deeper, more a casting forth of it, a moving more divided in its parts and scattered more. And to whate'er pursuit a man most clings, absorbed, or what the affairs on which we theretofore have tarried much, and mine hath strained upon the more, we seem in sleep, not rarely, to go at the same. The lawyers seem to plead and cite decrees, commanders they to fight and go at frays, sailors to live in combat with the winds, and we ourselves, indeed, to make this book, and still to seek the nature of the world and set it down when once discovered, here in these my country's leaves. Thus all pursuits, all arts in general, seem in sleeps to mock and master the minds of men. And whosoever day after day for long to games have given attention undivided, still they keep, as oft we note, even when they've ceased to grasp those games with their own senses, open paths within the mind wherethrough the idle films of just those games can come. And thus it is, for many a day thereafter those appear, floating before the eyes, that even awake they think they view the dancers moving round their supple limbs, and catch with both the ears the liquid song of harp and speaking chords, and view the same assembly on the seats, and manifold bright glories of the stage. So great the influence of pursuit and zest, and of the affairs wherein 'thas been the wont of men to be engaged. Nor only men, but soothly all the animals. Behold, thou'lt see the sturdy horses, though outstretched, yet sweating in their sleep, and panting ever, and straining utmost strength, as if for prize, as if with barriers opened now. And hounds of huntsmen, oft in soft repose, yet toss a sudden all their legs about, and growl and bark, and with their nostrils sniff the winds again, as though indeed they'd caught the scented footprints of wild beasts. And even when wakened, often they pursue the phantom images of stags, as though they did perceive them fleeing on before, until the illusion's shaken off, and dogs come to themselves again. And fawning breed of house-bred whelps do feel the sudden urge to shake their bodies and start from off the ground, as if beholding stranger visages. And ever the fiercer be the stock, the more in sleep the same is ever bound to rage. But flee the divers tribes of birds, and vex with sudden wings by night the groves of gods, when in their gentle slumbers they have dreamed of hawks in chase, a swooping on for fight. Again, the minds of mortals which perform with mighty motions mighty enterprises, often in sleep will do and dare the same in manner like. Kings take the towns by storm, succumb to capture, battle on the field, raise a wild cry as if their throats were cut even then and there. And many wrestle on and groan with pains, and fill all regions round with mighty cries and wild, as if then gnawed by fangs of panther or of lion fierce. Many amid their slumbers talk about their mighty enterprises, and have often enough become the proof of their own crimes. Many meet death. Many, as if headlong from lofty mountains tumbling down to earth with all their frame, are frenzied in their fright, and after sleep, as if still mad in mind, they scarce come to, confounded as they are by ferment of their frame. The thirsty man, likewise, he sits beside delightful spring or river, and gulpeth down with gaping throat nigh the whole stream. And oft the innocent young, by sleep o'ermastered, think they lift their dress by pail or public Jordan, and then void the water filtered down their frame entire, and drench the Babylonian coverlets magnificently bright. Again, those males into the surging channels of whose years now first has passed the seed, engendered within their members by the ripened days, are in their sleep confronted from without by idle images of some fair form, tidings of glorious face and lovely bloom, which stir and goad the regions turgid now with seed abundant, so that, as it were, with all the matter acted duly out, they pour the billows of a potent stream, and stain their garment. And, as said before, that seed is roused in us when once ripe age has made our body strong, as divers causes give to divers things impulse and irritation, so one force in humankind rouses the human seed to spurt from man. As soon as ever it issues, forced from its first abodes, it passes down in the whole body through the limbs and frame, meeting in certain regions of our thews, and stirs amain the genitals of man. The goaded regions swell with seed, and then comes the delight to dart the same at what the mad desire so yearns, and body seeks that object whence the mind by love is pierced. For well nigh each man falleth toward his wound, and our blood spurts even toward the spot from whence the stroke wherewith we are strook. And if indeed the foe be close, the red jet reaches him. Thus one who gets a stroke from Venus' shafts, whether a boy with limbs effeminate assault him, or a woman darting love from all her body, that one strains to get even to the thing whereby he's hit, and longs to join with it, and cast into its frame the fluid drawn even from within its own. For the mute craving doth presage delight. End of Book 4, Part 4. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan. Book 4, Part 5 of On the Nature of Things by Titus Lucretius Carus. Translated by William Ellery Leonard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Daniel Vermont. Book 4, Part 5. The Passion of Love. This craving 'tis that's Venus unto us. From this engender all the lures of love. From this, first hath into human hearts trickled that drop of joyance, which ere long is by chill care succeeded. Since indeed, though she thou lovest now be far away, yet idle images of her are near, and the sweet name is floating in thy ear. But it behooves to flee those images, and scare afar whatever feeds thy love, and turn elsewhere thy mind, and vent the sperm within thee gathered into sundry bodies. Nor, with thy thoughts still busied with one love, keep it for one delight, and so store up care for thyself, and pain inevitable. For lo, the ulcer, just by nourishing, grows to more life with deep inveteracy, and day by day the fury swells aflame, and the woe waxes heavier day by day, unless thou dost destroy even by new blows the former wounds of love, and curest them while yet they're fresh, by wandering freely round after the freely wandering Venus, or canst lead elsewhere the tumults of thy mind. Nor doth that man who keeps away from love yet lack the fruits of Venus, rather takes those pleasures which are free of penalties. For the delights of Venus, verily, are more unmixed for mortals sane of soul than for those sick at heart with love pining. Yea, in the very moment of possessing surges the heat of lovers to and fro, restive, uncertain, and they cannot fix on what to first enjoy with eyes and hands. The parts they sought for, those they squeeze so tight and pain the creature's body, close their teeth often against her lips, and smite with kiss mouth into mouth, because this same delight is not unmixed, and underneath are stings which goad a man to hurt the very thing, whate'er it be, from whence arise for him those germs of madness. But with gentle touch Venus subdues the pangs in midst of love, and the admixture of a fondling joy doth curb the bites of passion. For they hope that by the very body whence they caught the heats of love their flames can be put out. But nature protests 'tis all quite otherwise. For this same love it is, the one sole thing of which, the more we have, the fiercer burns the breast with fell desire. For food and drink are taken within our members, and since they can stop up certain parts, thus easily desire of water is glutted, and of bread. But lo, from human face and lovely bloom naught penetrates our frame to be enjoyed, save flimsy, idle images and vain. A sorry hope which oft the winds disperse, as when the thirsty man in slumber seeks to drink, and water ne'er is granted him wherewith to quench the heat within his members, but after idols of the liquids strives and toils in vain, and thirsts even whilst he gulps in middle of the torrent. Thus in love Venus deludes with idle images the lovers, nor they cannot sate their lust by merely gazing on the bodies, nor they cannot with their palms and fingers rub aught from each tender limb, the while they stray uncertain over all the body. Then at last, with members intertwined, when they enjoy the flower of their age, when now their bodies have sweet presage of keen joys, and Venus is about to sow the fields of woman, greedily their frames they lock, and mingle the slaver of their mouths, and breathe in to each other, pressing teeth on mouths. Yet to no purpose, since they're powerless to rub off aught, or penetrate, and pass with body entire into body, for oft they seem to strive and struggle thus to do. So eagerly they cling in Venus' bonds, whilst melt away their members, overcome by violence of delight. But when at last lust, gathered in the thews, hath spent itself, there come a brief pause in the raging heat. But then a madness just the same returns, and that old fury visits them again, when once again they seek and crave to reach they know not what, all powerless to find the artifice to subjugate the bane. In such uncertain state they waste away with unseen wound. To which be added, too, they squander powers, and with the travail wane. Be added, too, they spend their futile years under another's beck and call. Their duties neglected languish, and their honest name reeleth sick. And meantime their estates are lost in Babylonian tapestries, and unguents and dainty Sycionian shoes laugh on her feet. And, as ye may be sure, big emeralds of green light are set in gold, and rich sea-purple dress by constant wear grows shabby and all soaked with Venus' sweat. And the well-earned ancestral property becometh headbands, coifs, and many a time the cloaks or garments Alidensian or of the Chian isle. And banquets set with rarest cloth and viands are prepared, and games of chance, and many a drinking cup, and unguents, crowns, and garlands, all in vain, since from amid the wellspring of delights bubbles some drop of bitter to torment among the very flowers, when haply mind gnaws into self, now stricken with remorse for slothful years and ruin in bawdles, or else because she's left him all in doubt by launching some sly word, which still like fire lives wildly, cleaving to his eager heart, or else because he thinks she darts her eyes too much about and gazes at another, and in her face sees traces of a laugh. These ills are found in prospering love and true, but in crossed love and helpless, there be such as through shut eyelids thou canst still take in, uncounted ills, so that 'tis better far to watch beforehand in the way I've shown, and guard against enticements. For to shun a fall into the hunting snares of love is not so hard as to get out again when tangled in the very nets, and burst the stoutly knotted cords of Aphrodite. Yet, even when they're enmeshed with tangled feet, still canst thou scape the danger, lest indeed thou standest in the way of thine own good, and overlookest first all blemishes of mind and body of thy much preferred desirable dame. For so men do, eyeless with passion, and assign to them graces not theirs in fact. And thus we see creatures, in many a wise crooked and ugly, the prosperous sweethearts in a high esteem, and lovers gird each other and advise to placate Venus, since their friends are smit with a base passion, miserable dupes who seldom mark their own worst bane of all. The black-skinned girl is tawny like the honey, the filthy and the fetid's negligee, the cat-eyed, she's a little Pallas she, the sinewy and wizen's a gazelle, the pudgy and the pygmy is piquant, one of the graces sure, the big and bulky, oh, she's an admiration, imposante, the stuttering and tongue-tied sweetly lisps, the mute girl's modest, and the garrulous, the spiteful spitfire, is a sparkling wit. And she, who scarcely lives for scrawniness, becomes a slender darling. Delicate is she, who's nearly dead of coughing fit. The pursy female with protuberant breasts, she is like Ceres when the goddess gave young Bacchus suck. The pug-nosed lady-love, a satyrs, a feminine Silenus. The blubber-lipped is all one luscious kiss. A weary while it were to tell the whole. But let her face possess what charm ye will. Let Venus' glory rise from all her limbs. Forsooth, there still are others, and forsooth, we lived before without her. And forsooth, she does the same things, and we know she does all, as the ugly creature, and she scents, yes, she, her wretched self with vile perfumes, whom even her handmaids flee and giggle at behind her back. But he, the lover, in tears because shut out, covers her threshold o'er, often with flowers and garlands, and anoints her haughty doorposts with the marjoram, and prints, poor fellow, kisses on the doors. Admitted at last, if haply but one whiff got to him on approaching, he would seek decent excuses to go out forthwith. And his lament, long pondered, then would fall down at his heels, and there he'd damn himself for his fatuity, observing how he had assigned to that same lady more than it is proper to concede to mortals. And these our Venuses are ware of this. Wherefore, the more are they at pains to hide all the behind the scenes of life from those whom they desire to keep in bonds of love. In vain, since ne'ertheless thou canst by thought drag all the matter forth into the light, and well search out the cause of all these smiles. And if of graceful mind she be, and kind, do thou in thy turn overlook the same, and thus allow for poor mortality. Nor sighs the woman always with feigned love, who links her body round man's body locked, and holds him fast, making his kisses wet with lips sucked into lips. For oft she acts even from desire, and seeking mutual joys, incites him there to run love's race-course through. Nor otherwise can cattle, birds, wild beasts, and sheep and mares submit unto the males, except that their own nature is in heat, and burns abounding, and with gladness takes once more the Venus of the mounting males. And seest thou not how those whom mutual pleasure hath bound are tortured in their common bonds? How often, in the crossroads, dogs that pant to get apart strain eagerly asunder with utmost might, when all the while they're fast in the stout links of Venus. But they'd ne'er so pull, except they knew those mutual joys, so powerful to cast them unto snares and hold them bound. Wherefore again, even as I say, there is a joint delight. And when perchance, in mingling seed with his, the female hath o'erpowered the force of male, and by a sudden fling hath seized it fast, then are the offspring, more from mother's seed, more like their mothers, as from father's seed, they're like to fathers. But whom seest to be partakers of each shape, one equal blend of parents' features, these are generate from father's body and from mother's blood. When mutual and harmonious heat hath dashed together seeds, aroused along their frames by Venus' goads, and neither of the twain mastereth or is mastered. Happens, too, that sometimes offspring can to being come in likeness of their grandsires, and bring back often the shapes of grandsires' sires, because their parents in their bodies oft retain concealed many primal germs, commixed in many modes, which, starting with the stock, sire handeth down to son, himself a sire. Whence Venus, by a variable chance, engenders shapes, and diversely brings back ancestral features, voices too, and hair. A female generation rises forth from seed paternal, and from mother's body exist created males, since sex proceeds no more from singleness of seed than faces, or bodies, or limbs of ours. For every birth is from a twofold seed, and what's created hath, of that parent which it is more like, more than its equal share, as thou canst mark, whether the breed be male or female stock. Nor do the powers divine grudge any man the fruits of his seed sowing, so that never he be called father by sweet children his, and end his days in sterile love forever. What many men suppose, and gloomily they sprinkle the altars with abundant blood, and make the high platforms odorous with burnt gifts, to render big by plenteous seed their wives, and plague in vain godheads and sacred lots. For sterile are these men by seed too thick, or else by far too watery and thin, because the thin is powerless to cleave fast to the proper places. Straightway it trickles from them, and returned again retires abortively. And then, since seed more gross and solid than will suit is spent by some men, either it flies not forth amain with spurt prolonged enough, or else it fails to enter suitably the proper places, or, having entered, the seed is weakly mixed with seed of the woman. Harmonies of Venus are seen to matter vastly here, and some impregnate some more readily, and from some women conceive more readily and become pregnant. And many women, sterile before in several marriage beds, have yet thereafter obtained the mates from whom they could conceive the baby boys, and with sweet progeny grow rich. And even for husbands, whose own wives, although of fertile wombs, have borne for them no babies in the house, are also found concordant natures, so that they at last can bulwark their old age with goodly sons. A matter of great moment 'tis, in truth, that seeds may mingle readily with seeds suited for procreation, and that thick should mix with fluid seeds, with thick the fluid. And in this business 'tis of some import upon what diet life is nourished. For some foods thicken seeds within our members, and others thin them out and waste away. And in what modes the fond delight itself is carried on, this too importeth vastly. For commonly 'tis thought that wives conceive more readily, in manner of wild beasts, after the custom of the 4-foot breeds, because so postured, with the breast beneath and buttocks then upreared, the seeds can take their proper places. Nor is need the least for wives to use the motions of blandishment, for thus the woman hinders and resists her own conception, if too joyously herself she treats the Venus of the man, with haunches heaving, and with all her bosom now yielding like the billows of the sea. Ay, from the plowshare's even course and track she throws the furrow, and from proper places deflects the spurt of seed. And courtesans are thuswise wont to move for their own ends, to keep from pregnancy and lying in, and all the while to render Venus more a pleasure for the men, the which meseems our wives have never need of. Sometimes, too, it happens, and through no divinity nor arrows of Venus, that a sorry chit of scanty grace will be beloved by man. For sometimes she herself, by very deeds, by her complying ways and tidy habits, will easily accustom thee to pass with her thy lifetime. And moreover, lo, long habitude can gender human love. Even as an object smitten o'er and o'er by blows, however lightly, yet at last is overcome and wavers. Seest thou not, besides, how drops of water, falling down against the stones, at last bore through the stones? End of Book 4, Part 5. Recording by Daniel Vermont, Osaka, Japan.